All right. Ryan Finkelstein, how are you, my man?
Doing good.
I have a true confession to make.
Yep.
The first baseball team I ever followed was the New York Mets.
There you go.
85, a young Dwight Gooden gets called up. He has probably his best season. There's also another young fellow called Dale Strawberry. I fall in love with the team. Very next year, they win the 86 World Series. I could probably still name the lineup if I think about it. And then by the early 90s, I sort of transitioned to Marlins and a little bit of the Cubs. But you are a hardcore Mets fan. Where did the love for the Mets start?
It's me and my dad. You know, my dad, like most baseball fans, is passed down to generations. So I didn't really have a choice. I was made a Mets fan. I always say that I was happy that my dad made me Mets Giants, but he wasn't a Knicks fan. So growing up in South Florida, I got to choose my own team. So I got to be a Heat fan. Shaq came to town when I was, I don't know, probably 9 years old. And so I'm a Heat fan for basketball, but yeah, baseball is always the first passion. Played travel baseball growing up. And so baseball has always been the number one sport for me.
Your dad did you a solid. Number one, he didn't make you a Dolphins fan or a Jets fan. And then the one South Florida team that he had you latch onto was our best one.
Yeah, got the championships. It's funny enough, it's all worked out for me but the Mets, because he got me a couple Super Bowls with the Giants.
Yeah.
I've gotten some finals with the Heat, but yeah, we're still waiting on that
on that ring for the
Mets. The next ring for the Mets.
How did you get into podcasting?
So I first did a show when I was in college. I was a journalism student, and I was a pizza delivery driver. So I was listening to a lot of sports podcasts. Yeah. And I went out to my uncle. He was like a computer teacher and everything, so he sort of knew how to do audio and all that stuff. And I just said, would you do a sports podcast with me?
Yeah.
So it was called Let's Fink Sports. We did about a year and a half. My dad was probably the only one who listened, or a couple of my buddies, but it was just a way to just get my chops, because I had known from writing, like the number one thing when you're making content is just repetition.
Yeah, 100%.
That's the biggest thing. So I had that background. And then Locked On Mets came when I was a final year in college. I was listening to Locked On Heat. And so basically the Locked On Podcast Network, it's your team every day.
Yeah.
We have a show for every team. It started with NBA, then the NFL channel. I was looking to listen to Locked On Mets. I was like, I wonder if they have a show. They didn't. I saw it coming soon, and I was like, I wonder, are they hiring? What's the deal? Yeah. At the time, our CEO's email was right on the website. So I just reached out to him. We talked on the phone. I was still like nowadays, I don't know if me at 22, 23 would have gotten the seat I'm in now.
Sure.
But the MLB channel was new. We had a good conversation, but he was still kind of looking for a more established, probably like a New York writer or somebody.
Yeah.
But I just started sending him episodes. I was like, you don't have a host, season's about to start. I was like, this is what it would sound like. And so, yeah, that's how I got the gig. Didn't know what I was getting into at all, because all of a sudden I'm doing a daily podcast.
Yeah.
My first ad read was for Blue Chew. And so I'm college kid, like first time talking on a mic, put myself out there. And I remember, I'll never forget, the ad started like, guys, let's talk about sex. I'm like, that's where I'm starting out. And it was definitely a challenging kind of first year of doing it, and not really, getting a lot out of it as far as trying to build an audience and everything. But, my dad always tells me to follow things through. So, I'll give it the first season, see if I like it. And I remember the trade deadline 2019, Marcus Stroman got traded to the Mets. Mm-hmm. And that was a big turning point for my show, where, especially when you're doing sports content, like, a big win obviously will get you some buzz, but the transaction is the biggest thing.
Right.
So once that trade happened, I was able to kind of get a foothold, and now I'm 1,700 plus episodes later, 6 years down the road. It's been a crazy ride.
That's awesome. So it's funny. I think one of the things that's going to hurt the NBA with the new collective bargaining is that it's going to be less player movement, because it's hard to trade these players' contracts. And I think a big part of the season is the gossip. Who's going to get traded where? What? And that's great for content and ESPN, a guy like you. When Juan Soto is about to sign, what does that do to viewership?
It's big. It's big. Juan Soto was a big story. And even, when you're covering the Mets, the offseason, the trade deadline, but any star player you can talk about, right? Because anything's possible, especially since Steve Cohen bought the Mets. So yeah, that's definitely a big part of trying to gain viewership is, when those big players come up, you got to jump on that story and you got to it's a story that doesn't go away, right? You don't
Yeah.
just talk about it once and leave it. Like I must have done 10 shows about Juan Soto before he signed. And even now, you're always trying to look at the star player because
Right.
ultimately, especially for the common fan, I mean, in my final segment of my show, I might talk about the 26 men on the roster because my diehards care.
Yeah.
But the first segment, I better be talking about Juan Soto's four at bats, like because that's what they're looking for.
I mean, so a big trade, a Juan Soto signing, does it 50% spike, 100%? Like what does it do to YouTube and your podcast channel?
So I'd say there's always with my, especially because I'm daily and everything. I have a base that when they walk their dog in the morning and they drive the kids to school, they have a routine of listening. So
Yeah, sure.
those people are always there.
Yeah, right. You got that core base.
That core base is always there. But then when you get a big trade, something like that, that's where you get, for one, I'm sure there was Yankees fans tuning into my show after Juan Soto signed to hear the other side of it. If there's a trade, you get both teams coming in. So it's definitely a pretty big spike. I don't know an exact number for it, but those are usually the biggest shows. And I will say, actually, even sometimes the not even the trades, like Pete Alonso's. Like I did probably more views on Pete Alonso than Juan Soto because it strikes such a chord with Mets fans that have been following him since 2019.
He's their guy.
And that was a longer saga to get him signed. It was multiple months, and it was, is he gonna leave? Is he gonna stay? Where could he go? So you find this stuff that gets the fan base passionate, and that's where you kind of latch on.
So I listen to a lot of sports podcasts. I actually, the Locked On Network for the Heat, I also listen to, and I got a question about that. But one of the things I miss about sports podcasts that they don't have is the caller.
Yeah.
The knucklehead caller, because I used to be the caller. And I would call in, I would call in as a prank and offer ridiculous trades, and the host would yell at me or get into it like a good debate. And that's what I do miss about the podcast is like there's always a knucklehead caller that stirs the pot with the host.
Yeah, you can create some of it through not necessarily through the show, but like you can do like the live streams or you can do spaces on Twitter. Yeah. So I've done that at times, and that's a good way to engage with the audience a little bit. You can do, I know some podcasts do like voicemails, but you don't have the back and forth.
The back and forth's the best part.
Yeah. So and there's still the sports talk radio out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think those spaces, and I know for Just Baseball, the other company I work for, we have a Discord now.
Yeah.
And so we'll be doing a lot of like live Q&A stuff. So that is something that I think, as more people move to this medium, I think we'll find a way to get the audience into the conversation a little bit more.
What is the Locked On business model? So they hire independent guys like you and just cover certain teams, and that's how they how do they do this?
So Locked On provides, for one, the sponsors and the infrastructure, right? So when I first got my show, there was a template of, here's how you should do a Locked On podcast, right? It's at the time it was 2 segments, now it's 3 segments. Your segment should be 7 to 10 minutes. This is what you should hit on your cold open. This is how you go to your break. So they do give you, especially now that we're, as a company, we might be 10 years, old now. I've been with the company for 6, but it's really, boiled down to a science of how to follow the Locked On model to find success.
Right.
How to do your thumbnails. Now we're even doing, there's some AI that they're incorporating where I can put in the audio of my show and get, if you want to send a newsletter to the audience, here's the newsletter. If you want to, here's optimized titles, descriptions. So they do provide a lot of resources to us that we couldn't have otherwise.
Yeah.
But actually producing the show, that's 100% me. I record, the video. I then, edit the video, get that ready for YouTube. I do the audio. I post the audio, the video. I have to do this. I actually have someone that does social media for me because I'm not the biggest fan of social media. I'm just not great at it.
There you go.
But yeah, the graphics for social media, all of it is on the host. They help provide us the infrastructure. And then they, the big thing with Locked On is, you have 30 teams that they can
Right.
sell together to sponsors.
Correct. Right.
You know, so my show might do a larger portion of the audience than the Marlins because the Marlins don't have quite a big of a fan base. But it's a way where a Marlins podcast that might not get the volume to typically get sponsors, now they can get a piece of sponsorship too, because they're sold with the Mets, the Dodgers, the Yankees. All of us are packaged together.
Yeah, and they're tapped into whatever market gets the next Juan Soto or the next big trade.
Exactly.
What's your process of getting prepared? I mean, how many, you do what, 3-4 shows a week?
So I started last year. I now do 7 days a week.
7 days a week?
Yeah, in the off season, I'll take the weekends off. And the network is just Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
But what I learned with the baseball season is a lot of times I'm just waiting to record until Sunday night.
Yeah.
And sometimes the Friday and the Saturday night games are the best games.
Right.
And also the games that have the most eyeballs.
Yeah.
So it got to a point last year, the Mets in May had a brutal month.
Yeah, terrible.
But there was always some crazy thing that happened.
Yeah.
And so I started doing every day following this team that was they couldn't get their heads out of their ass. And then end of May, they turn a corner and then it becomes this incredible run. So I did daily from, I think it was like May 17th last year, all the way through the run in October.
Yeah.
My process as far as recording, I watch the game. I wait till my wife goes to bed. I go into my studio. I do my research. My prep might take, I don't know, half an hour, depending on what I'm talking about. And then, I record, and then I have to do all the post-production stuff. And I think the whole thing might take me maybe 3 hours to do a show. If it's an easy day, it might be a little bit less. But it's a late night thing for me. But it's a lot of fun to have a show that, I do in my office at home that people are listening to and can make a little money on. It's pretty good gig.
That's cool. How do you separate being a fan / reporter and giving call it a fair analysis on what's going on with the Mets?
So, I if I wanted to, right, I because of my other company with the writing, I'm locked into the MLB portal. I could go to the games and I could cover it in person.
Yeah.
To me, I think what makes my show unique and what people come for is I am a Mets fan.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to lose sight of that. And I don't necessarily want to be a reporter on the team. I'm an analyst on the team.
Right.
No one's done as much Mets podcast or content as me over the past 6 years. I watch everything. I watch all the press conferences. I follow everything, but I still have a fan perspective. I don't lose sight of that. Now, I'm not going to say we as if I'm part of the Mets. I don't go that far, and I'm very critical at times when I should be, but I'm also going to celebrate when the Mets win. And I think my audience doesn't want me to be down the middle and just covering it like a reporter. They want me kind of along the ride with them, because every single day throughout the baseball season, they can tune in every morning and follow the journey with me on my show.
So not only do the Mets, from a player perspective, give you great content, but the owner gives you great content.
Yeah.
He's one of the last great, well, he's a newer owner, but one of the last great owners that speaks up, spends money, does big things. He wants to build a casino now. How often are you talking about Steve Cohen?
In the beginning, a lot, for sure, right? Because he was just to go from the Wilpons.
Yeah,
I mean, my first year hosting the show was just constantly bashing the Wilpons, because there was probably more to talk about the Wilpons than the Cohens, just because of how embarrassing they were. But yeah, I mean, the Cohens definitely come up when their stories. In the first year, he was a little bit more vocal on Twitter and stuff. So there was times where he would kind of put his foot in his mouth or send out a tweet that he shouldn't have, that I would comment. But I think more at this point, it's not necessarily talking about Cohen as much as what he's kind of opened up for the Mets. And it's a new era where you can talk about the Mets, where it's always been kind of what can go wrong, what should go wrong, all that type of stuff. But now they're trying to break away from that, and it's talking about how they've invested in all facets of the organization, how the scouting's gotten better, they created a pitching lab, so development of players got better. So it's really kind of highlighting all the positives that he's kind of poured into the organization through the incredible resources.
Give me the current state of the Mets.
It's as good as it's been in my lifetime, for sure. Well, because for one, you got the owner.
He's going to spend the bucks.
He's going to spend, and I mean, there might be a point in time if the Mets have won a couple World Series where maybe he'll pull it back.
Yeah.
But he is so hungry for the Mets to win that as a fan, you just know every single year they're gonna put a team together to win a World Series.
Right.
And it's funny because the last couple off seasons, he has these annual meetings with the media where he's kind of like State of the Union of the Mets. And he's talking like, I can't believe how much money I had to spend to put this team together, and I can't do this forever, but I want to win. And so that's the first thing. And then the other big thing is David Stearns is the president of baseball operations of the Mets now. He was the president of the Brewers. And the Brewers are kind of the National League version of what the Rays are known as, a team that can do a lot with a little when it comes to the money that's spent. And they have consistently, the Brewers, been a division where you have the Cardinals, the Cubs, other teams that theoretically should be winning that division. So he's taken that ability to identify talent, all those things, but now he has the resources of the richest owner in the sport, or I guess the second richest of the Dodgers. So just the stability top to bottom from owner to president. I think the Mets have a good manager right now in Carlos Mendoza. So they kind of check all the boxes. And then now you already had Francisco Lindor, one of the most consistent players in baseball. You add in Juan Soto, a guy that can be the best hitter in baseball. Right. So it is a really exciting time where there's a clear window where the Mets are going to be competing and hopefully can maybe get that World Series.
Give me the current state of baseball, good and bad.
So I think baseball is in a good place. We're seeing with Just Baseball, the other company that I work for, that I write for, I'm the managing editor, we're seeing engagement across the board. And I think for us at Just Baseball, we're trying to appeal to a younger audience of baseball fans because they are out there. And I think, as sites like Just Baseball and John Boy obviously does a lot, and Foul Territory is a big podcast now, the more that we're getting some younger, fresher takes on baseball, we can kind of cultivate to that younger audience that still is really fired up about the game. And I also think that some of the rule changes that baseball has gone through over the past 5 years have been so good. I mean, the fact that you can go to a game now and sometimes it's almost too quick, right?
It's almost too quick. Yeah. Last night's Marlins Mets game, I think, was 2 hours.
Yeah, because you had Sandy Alcantara and Kodai Senga, two the best pitchers. And so, games can fly. But it's great, too, because, when there's action, some of the innings will, we had on the first game of the series, the Mets scored 7 runs.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of a longer inning, obviously.
Yeah.
But even with a huge inning like that, I mean, I think the game started at 6:40 and it was over by 9:30 for sure. So
yeah, man,
that was huge. Because when I first started, there were games that were 4 hours long. And,
brutal.
And it's hard. I think there's Mets fans like my dad and like me who are gonna watch every pitch no matter what.
Right.
They're diehards. They're gonna. But how do you get the basketball fan to say, "Oh, baseball is actually a pretty cool sport"? I think shortening the game has been big, and then Shohei Ohtani is obviously massive.
Yeah.
And on a global scale, baseball is doing tremendously well. That's why they're starting every year in Tokyo with the Dodgers, because it's the biggest thing possible there right now, Major League Baseball. So I think baseball is definitely doing well. I think they're right now at a crossroads of trying to figure out how to break away from, I think, a model in baseball that was really tied to cable and sports packages. And now it's trying to figure out the streaming element of it, but they'll get there. And I think that's ultimately going to make baseball more accessible. And the thing that I think baseball has going for it that eventually can get even a bigger audience is just, if once you're bought in, it's a game every night. I think that's so exciting about baseball is, when the season starts, you always have a game, which is great.
You always have a game. So many things can happen. A team can get hot. I love the rule changes. And I'm a longtime baseball guy. I love the history of the game. I don't like messing. And I was kind of like, I don't want, but I got to a point where I can't sit for 4.5 hours to watch a game, and the nonstop rotation of relief pitchers, a guy would throw one batter, like that kind of stuff. And then the shift, there's no in-game action. It's either strikeout or home run, became what I think is the problem with the NBA now, which is 3-pointers. I'm watching Oklahoma City play the Celtics the other night. Celtics took 63 3-pointers. The game was so boring. Yeah. And this was the marquee matchup. The NBA's got to do, I think, some of the stuff for baseball. I've been critical of this commissioner, but when it comes to the rules change, I think he's done a really, really good job. Question is, the labor agreement's almost up. do you think that there will be a strike in 2027? Right? Would it be
Yeah.
27?
So the current agreement goes through 2026.
Mm.
So we're gonna get baseball this year. We'll have it next year uninterrupted. But they're already, you can already see them kind of
Butting heads.
moving and getting in line for another strike. And the Dodgers right now, because of the Shohei Ohtani contract,
Yeah.
right? They deferred $680 million of the $700
Yeah.
million deal, and they're structuring all of their contracts where it's a big signing bonus,
Yeah.
and then a lot of deferred money.
Yeah.
So it's a way that the players get some money up front
Yeah.
so they can invest or whatever it is. But when it comes to circumventing the luxury tax, that brings down the present day value, which is how they calculate deals.
Right.
So that's a big problem where they set all these rules in place and all these tax penalties and everything to stop spending.
Yeah.
But the Dodgers, the Mets, the Yankees, these teams are still spending.
Correct.
And so that gap is just getting larger and larger. There's talk of, the owners want a salary cap, but then the players want a salary floor.
Right.
So is that going to happen? And I think a big thing for baseball has always been the lack of a salary cap. And,
right.
The players have always believed that leads to the spending.
Right.
Because, if there's a salary cap at some point, the Mets and the Dodgers wouldn't be able to go anymore. So it's definitely going to be a fight over money, as it always is, and where the split comes in. My hope is they learn from what happened last time, which is you can go through your collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah.
You can have it take place during the offseason, and you can get it wrapped up and still not miss any games. But I think that the last deal from the player side, I think they believe that they got a raw deal a little bit because teams still aren't spending.
Right.
I mean, you have countless teams that didn't even sign a free agent this offseason.
Marlins.
I think the Marlins finally got Cal Quantrill.
Yeah, for like a couple million bucks.
For like $3 million bucks at the end of spring training, or maybe right before spring training. But there's a lot of teams that aren't spending. The A's spent this time because there was going to be a grievance.
Oh, grievance, yeah.
I think the Marlins are in the same boat now. They have to spend soon, or there'll be a grievance. So I think baseball would be a lot better place if some of these small market owners sold. And
I agree.
You got more of the Steve Cohns in the world. They're just dying to get a team and get in on it.
Yeah.
That would spend. But also you see a small market team like the Padres spend like crazy.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden they're potentially kind of having to hold that spending. So it'll be interesting to see how the collective bargaining agreement ultimately shakes out. My hope would be, though, we just don't miss any games.
Don't miss any games. It's a black eye to the sport when you do. But I think, look, I got no beef with the Dodgers and the Mets and the Yankees spending money. I expect that from a big market. My issue is the smaller markets not having a floor. I mean, it's ridiculous that the Marlins payroll this year is like $50 million. Like, you guys aren't even trying. Come on, man.
Yeah.
So I agree with the players that there's got to be a floor. If you got to spend, X amount, whatever that number is, they can divide and conquer. But they would be very, very foolish to go on strike and miss any significant amount of time, because I think there's going to be a group of fans that just aren't going to come back. There's so many more. Like I was talking about it today. It's like when I was a kid, you had the big four, right? You had football, basketball, hockey, and baseball. Dude, now like UFC is as big as it's ever been. Yeah. And you got, all these other little niche sports. Women's sports are huge now. Like they weren't even they didn't even have a basketball league when I was a kid. Like, so if each one of those is taking a slice of, call it the sports dollars, you're going to have to battle for it. I mean, college football has never been bigger. Yeah. College basketball, the tournament, the numbers are fantastic. Like, so if they're smart, they cut a deal and they keep going forward. And I think they got to do a better job of marketing their stars, right? I mean, the whole thing is like, Mike Trout walks into a bar here in Doral in Miami. I bet you 50% of the bar, I know 10% of the bar might know who he is, and that's a shame, because he's literally going to go down as an all-time great. So they got to do a better job of that. But I can't let you go without doing some fun rapid fire questions. Yeah. You ready?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. I'm going to test some of your Mets knowledge.
All right. Some
basic stuff. Ready? Who's your favorite Met all time?
David Wright.
David Wright. Who's the most underrated Met ever?
Most underrated Met ever. Man, that one might have stunned me a little bit. Ever. I mean, there's been some pitchers like David Cone that probably don't get as much, as much recognition as your Jacob deGrom, and Tom Seaver.
Because Cone had a big career at other places. That's why. Yeah.
But he had some good years with the Mets. trying to think of underrated. And I appreciated Daniel Murphy during my time. Daniel Murphy
Yeah,
was
you could hit. You could hit.
was a really good hitter. Honestly, you know what? Crazy one. I'd say it's starting to turn, but Francisco Lindor has been ridiculously underappreciated.
Should have won MVP.
I mean, he should.
Well, hey, it's tough to beat Ohtani, but a lot of years he wins.
I felt like going into September, Lindor had played him to about a tie. I thought they were right there, and then Lindor got hurt, and Ohtani hit like 15 home runs, went 50-50.
He set a record.
I probably would have voted for Ohtani too, even though I thought Lindor was incredible, but he hasn't been an all-star in a Mets uniform. So definitely nationally, Lindor is underappreciated for what he brings to the table. And it wasn't really until last year when he played at the MVP level that the Mets fans really kind of galvanized around him. So Lindor kind of a sneaky underrated guy.
There you go. Okay. What's the best Met uniform, the pinstripes or the alternative black uniforms?
I'm kind of partial to the alternative blue that I got on today. I do like the blue. So those are my favorite.
Yeah, Mets got some good worst heartbreak for a Met fan.
Worst heartbreak for a Mets fan. I got to go on my own life experience of what I've gone through. I would say 2006, the Mets had a great run that ended Carlos Beltran striking out looking against the Cardinals.
Okay, yeah.
In the NLCS. I think they would have won the World Series that year if they had won that game. I always like to point out on my show that Carlos Beltran was amazing in that series and amazing in a Mets uniform. Another underappreciated guy.
Yeah, he should be in the Hall of Fame.
He probably will be next year. But I would say, so that loss in 06 that was then compounded by collapses in 07 and 08.
Yeah.
That was my worst, I think, as a Mets fan. It was such a good team. I was young teenager at that point. So that was like, I was really bought in, and they should have had a lot more success than they did.
What's your best Met memory?
My best Met memory. I mean, I think there's a collection of memories of I always like going out to spring training with my dad and having that experience. Yeah. And so I have a lot of stories of trying to get Mike Piazza's autograph as a kid, those type of things. When it comes to the actual moments as a Mets fan from what they've done on the field, last year was really, really incredible. Like Pete Alonso's home run to get the Mets. They were down to their final couple outs. They're trailing. Alonso hits the game-winning home run top of the ninth against the Brewers. That was awesome. The last year where the Mets clinched against the Braves was another awesome one. But I think 2015 for me, when the Mets made the playoffs that year, was probably my highlight, just because it had been at that point 9 years since the Mets had made it. There was a lot of stuff that year that was going on for me personally on the side too, as I was, just out of high school, starting college, trying to figure out what I was going to do and all that. And that team really had me bought into the Mets. And actually, it's when I started writing about the Mets too, when I was 19. So that team making it in that run was really special.
It's funny, the teams that you attach as a sports fan, sometimes it's not the obvious one. It's a moment in your life or a memory that you had going to a ball game with your dad that you really connect with. Dream guest on your podcast?
Probably David Wright.
David Wright. So you're a big David Wright guy.
Big David Wright guy. I wore number 5 through travel baseball.
There you go.
I always say that I was really blessed as a sports fan growing up, because my sports idols were just awesome guys. Like David Wright, Dwayne Wade, Eli Manning, just people that role models that did everything right. And David Wright would definitely be the dream guest.
Yeah, had he not gotten hurt, he would have been a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
What one baseball rule you would change?
One baseball rule I would change. That's tough. I am. I mean, I don't know if it's one. I am interested to watch them eventually play with this new challenge system to let for the calling the balls and strikes. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It adds a layer of strategy to the game that I think is really cool, because the teams will only get a certain amount of challenges, and if you are wrong, you lose them.
Yeah.
So it adds a little bit of a wrinkle. I don't know if there is any other rules that I would change. Like it's funny because the extra inning rule came in, putting the ghost runner on second base.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I hate this idea.
And now I love it.
Yeah, I love it. It's great. It's great.
I love it. I'm with you. All the new rule changes came in. That's the only one I had, and I really like it.
Yeah.
So it's great. Should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame?
Yes.
DH or no DH?
Absolute DH.
Torpedo bat or no torpedo bat?
I'm cool with the torpedo bat. I mean, I want to see.
I want one.
Yeah, for real. I want to if the data comes back and it's just obvious that it's a significant advantage, but at the same time, anybody can get them, and it's also not. It's not as simple as I'm just going to pick up a torpedo bat tomorrow. Like a lot goes into creating. It's almost like getting fitted for a golf club.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar where you got to go and go to the facility and take 1,000 swings and to really identify where they want to put the mass in the barrel and everything else. So I don't think it's as simple as just pick up the bat and it's like a juiced bat, like a corked bat. But there could be, if it proves to be too drastic, that it's such a huge advantage. But at the same time, though, baseball's at its best when offense is high.
Yeah, right.
As much as I love pitching, I was a pitcher when I played, so I always appreciate good pitching matchups. At the end of the day, fans, chicks dig the long ball, the whole deal. It's an offense when offense is at its peak. Typically, the interest is there. So I guess I'm all for it.
And it's the number one thing everybody's talking about in baseball right now. It's great podcast content. I'm sure you've done the torpedo bat conversation already.
I touched on it, and it's one of those stories that has been able to cross over where it's not just baseball people talking about it.
Yeah.
Part of that is because they put some memes together when it happened, or they blew up the
it was
barrel.
Hilarious. Yeah.
Jazz Chisholm swinging like a cricket mallet or whatever. But I think it's anything that gets that much interest in the game is good.
Which fan base do Mets hate more, the Yankees or the Phillies?
I think the Braves. I mean, I might just but to me, it also depends. Like if you were living in New York and all your buddies, it's really Mets. Yankees,
yeah. Then you hate them.
Then you hate them a little more. Like for me as a kid, I hated Marlins fans because those were the ones I saw the most in class.
Right.
Who would give me shit the most about being a Mets fan when things were bad. But I would say Phillies Braves. To me, that's the real division rivalry. Those are the teams you're competing against. So to me, that's the bigger rivalry. Although Juan Soto and that whole element has added a little more intrigue to the Yankees Mets rivalry. And if they did meet in the World Series again, that would obviously be awesome.
You can't like the Yankees.
I still hate the Yankees. I have a Yankees suck shirt, but I hate the Braves and the Phillies more.
If you ran the Mets, what's one move you'd make?
Right now, I trade for an ace.
Sandy Alcantara. He's available.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the Marlins are going to put a little in-division tax on that one. That might be a little too steep. But Sandy's definitely a name I have circled. Yeah, I guess if I was running the team right now, outside of you're not going to make a trade in April, I'd maybe look at locking up some of the young players. Like I think Mark Vientos and Francisco Alvarez are a couple young players that the Mets could sign to pre-arbitration deals now that would be very beneficial in the long run, but at the same time, because of where they're at with their payroll, you have to pay 110 cents on the dollar for everyone you sign. Yeah. So if you take a guy like Vientos who's making the minimum this year, and now all of a sudden he's making $5 million, that's $10 million.
There you go.
So that's definitely I think looking at locking up the young guys in this team might need an ace.
2 more questions. Should Keith Hernandez be in the Hall of Fame?
Absolutely.
Why?
Greatest defensive first baseman in MLB history. Mm-hmm. And, he's been sort of knocked just because he doesn't have some of the power stats of your traditional.
He won an MVP?
But won an MVP. I think he won a batting title that year.
He won a batting title, MVP, and a World Series.
And like 11 Gold Gloves or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, it's a crazy number.
He's one of, I think, the top 5 guys in all time in Gold Gloves, I believe. So, yeah, and he played first base different than anyone else.
Yeah.
I mean, even though I was born in 95, I still grew up on the 86 Mets somehow.
Yeah, of course,
because
everybody
of my dad.
And it's like the 72 Dolphins. I wasn't born in 1972, but I know everything about them.
Exactly. But to me, if you look at first baseman in MLB history, Keith Hernandez, all around one of the best ever, one of the best leaders ever, part of 2 World Series teams with the Cardinals and the Mets 2 franchises. And not that it factors into the Hall of Fame, but has had a great career as a broadcaster too. So
he was on Seinfeld.
So yeah, I think he probably eventually the Veterans Committee comes around and gets him in. I just hope it happens.
While he's alive
soon.
Yeah, you don't want a Pete Rose situation. Okay, who's on your Mount Rushmore of Mets players?
David Wright, shocker.
Shocker.
David Wright for sure. Jacob deGrom, because watching him pitch.
He was fantastic.
Unbelievable.
Peak deGrom was as good as it got.
It was for sure. I mean, so if it's my personal one, Piazza,
it's yours.
So then Piazza's on there for sure.
Piazza, yeah.
And you know what? I'm gonna throw Lindor on there because
oh my God, such a recency bias. Come on,
not even though because I've been a Mets fan my whole life, but I've been covering this team and watching every day, and covering every single game in media. And the guy, he's gonna go down. I mean, he already is.
He's awesome. He's
already
awesome.
the greatest shortstop in franchise history. And you have a couple guys on the team that are probably going to go down as the greatest in franchise history. But what Lindor did last year was, I think, the best season I've ever watched for a player in a Mets uniform.
Fantastic.
You had on, it was, May 30th or whatever it was, the guy, Jorge Lopez, launches his glove in the stands after he gives up a home run to Shohei Ohtani. So it's like laughing stock. Mets are at an all-time low. And Lindor locks the door of the clubhouse and has a players only meeting. And then he stood in front of the media for 12 minutes and answered every single question as good as you possibly could. Yeah. Went out the next day, went 4 for 4, homered to get the Mets on the board, scored the game winning run. Just, talk the talk, walk the walk, did it all. And then was an MVP the rest of the season. It was as good as I've ever seen anyone play in a Mets uniform. So I'll give him my last.
Yeah, and he's a true 5-tool player. He does everything excellent.
And you don't see that. 5-tool players are so rare. I mean, in a Mets uniform, I think Carlos Beltran, like the only other one I could think of that was. And then David Wright at one point was able to steal some bases and do a lot of things. But yeah, Francisco Lindor, very high on the list.
There's a lot of 86 Mets fans that are very disappointed with your Mount Rushmore, but that's
I was born in 95. I'm
kidding.
If I did an all-time Mets Mount Rushmore, you'd have to put in Tom Seaver.
You have to put in Tom Seaver, Gary Carter,
Keith Hernandez.
The question is, do you put Strawberry and Gooden?
So if I did an all-time one, I would say for sure you'd go Seaver, Piazza, David Wright, and then the fourth spot would be a tough one for me. It's hard to put one of Doc or Darryl without the other, right?
Right.
So I don't know. Maybe then you'd go off the board a little bit. But I'd probably, because it's a franchise steeped in pitching, I'd probably say you could throw DeGrom on there. Honestly, he did some good things. But I'd probably say Seaver, Doc, Piazza, Wright.
Okay, that's a good one. One final question: do you celebrate Bobby Bonilla Day?
I get text messages from my friends always.
Always. One of my favorite days of the year.
Yeah, everyone always. The funny thing is, like, now with deferred contracts, good luck celebrating all of them. I mean, the Dodgers are going to be paying Shohei Ohtani until his 60s. And
I think Bonilla's contract goes longer than Ohtani's.
But there's an end in sight to Bonilla Day.
I'll be sad that day.
I think it might be 2035, but don't quote me on that. But I've checked and I was like, there is light at the end of the tunnel where I'm not going to get the Bobby Bonilla gift from my friend of him, pouring, Mets money over him. But
he's known now, I think, more for that contract than him as a player. Like most people be like, what kind of player was it? He was actually a pretty good ball player.
He's a great ball player.
But that contract, whoever signed it is brilliant.
Yeah. 1 point, whatever it is, 1.4 million.
Ever.
Yeah. Like 35 years or something crazy.
Crazy. Thanks for coming on the show. Where can people find out about you? Where can they hear the podcast?
So you can find Locked On Mets wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, the whole deal. And then also I encourage people to check out justbaseball.com. We're doing a lot of great written content every single day. We have the most comprehensive, if you're into prospects, top 100 prospect list that you're going to find that's not behind a paywall, where you have write-ups on all top 100 prospects. So it's definitely an up-and-coming sports media company that's focused just on baseball, hence the name Just Baseball, and we're doing a lot of great stuff.
Give me your top 3 prospects that people should be paying attention to that will play this year.
Roman Anthony for the Red Sox is definitely going to play. I mean, you're seeing a couple of them already now, like Cam Smith broke camp with the Astros. That was a shocker. And Matt Shaw, that one was expected that he would break camp with the Cubs. Jackson Jobe, I can't remember if he broke with the Tigers or not, but he's definitely a pitching prospect to keep your eye on for sure. And the Phillies have one as well. Andrew Painter is another guy that should at some point be up. Whenever there's a hole in that rotation, he's another guy that can be a lights out pitcher.
Any hope for Marlins fans?
There's some hope for sure. I do think it's going to take time, but they finally have a president with a little bit of a direction.
Yeah.
And they got some decent pitching. They're going to get a haul for Sandy.
Right.
So that'll help a lot. And, you can watch right now, Otto Lopez and Xavier Edwards, kind of a sneaky, fun middle infield combo.
Yeah.
Griffin Conine's doing some things, so you got the Conine name in there. But I think the Marlins in a couple years, all the prospects come up, they can have a little run, but it's going to take a little bit.
It's going to take a little. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, you're welcome, for sure. Cool.